And finally, our top story tonight. For more than a decade, one clause in India's tax law quietly bled the IT industry. It called Indian firms intermediaries, even when they worked for overseas clients. That one word cost them export status, blocked refunds, and forced them to pay 18% GST on services delivered abroad. Endless disputes, drained cash flows, and a global disadvantage. Now, the GST Council has finally killed Section 13(8)(b). So, from here on, the customer's location decides. If the customer is overseas, your service is an export. What this change means? Well, in other words, export benefits are back, which means services to foreign clients will be zero rated. Refunds unlocked. Firms can reclaim input tax credits. Cash flow improves. More money in hand to reinvest. Litigation ends. No more endless battles over being intermediaries. This is not just an accounting fix. It's actually a watershed moment for Indian IT firms and global capability centers. Why does this matter? Well, here it is. India hosts more than 1700 to 1900 plus GCCs, running finance, HR, supply chain, analytics, and AI labs for the world's biggest companies. With this change, their operating costs drop. Working capital is freed up. India's pitch to global boards gets even stronger. This move also brings India's tax system closer to global standards, giving multinationals the confidence that India is not just the cheapest option, it's actually the smartest one. For years, this clause was the single biggest roadblock flagged by industry bodies like NASSCOM. Its removal means billions in working capital unlocked, disputes reduced, and a clear path for new GCC investments. From banking and consulting to back office and AI, every service that goes global from India is now firmly in the export category. To decode this game changing reform, we have a brilliant panel. Introducing our first member, Gaurav Vasu, founder and CEO of Unearth Site. Gaurav Vasu is founder and CEO at Unearth Insight, a growth strategist with 13 plus years across IT services and BPO. He's advising on market entry, location analysis, mergers and acquisitions, talent mapping, vendor benchmarking, and financial models. He's actually an investor who co founded an HR tech advisory and is building a cognitive financial intelligence platform. We also have with us Rishabh Chopra, who is a lawyer plus executive MBA, who specializes in law firm partner hiring and CXO searches across finance and human resource, building leadership ecosystems across finance, legal, and people strategy. And for today's conversation, he will be bringing us the legal plus talent perspective on how the IGST change impacts entity structures, compliance, and leadership hiring for GCCs. And finally, completing this wonderful trinity, Abhijit Adhikari, who brings a data driven lens to India's IT and GCC landscape. He works on market research, end to end report development, and data analysis at AIM Research, turning complex findings into actionable insights on where the GCC market is heading and what this GST change means on the ground. I promise you this, if there is anyone who can tell us why this reform is a turning point for IT and GCCs, it's definitely this panel. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. Unfortunately, we don't have Gaurav with us. We have Rishabh and we have Abhijit. It's wonderful to have you, and we are very glad to have you with us. We are, of course, really looking forward to this conversation. Hi, Abhijit.
Hi, Sudhi.
How are you doing? I hope everything is good.
Yep, I'm
Okay,
doing
now that
great.
the pleasantries are over, I would like to start off by, of course, with your reactions, the both of you, in terms of what does it mean in terms of this response, this particular reform that has taken place. What is your reaction on this development? Sure, I'll repeat it again. Before I actually get into our deep dive, I wanted to just seek your reactions, the both of you gentlemen, on this particular development of this particular reform that has taken place. I hope both of you can hear me, Rishabh and Abhijit. Okay. So, Rishabh, would you like to go first?
Sure, happy to. And
Thank you.
interestingly, this makes a lot of sense, right? Because it's not just a tax issue which is being solved. This is actually like boardroom confidence that they've gained.
Mm-hmm.
And the removal of this intermediary clause, if you look at it, is
Mm-hmm.
not just a normal tax tweak, right? It's basically telling the world that, hey, India is open for serious business. And
Mm-hmm.
governance is no longer a minefield, but from a lens that I typically look at it, which is a talent solutions specialist, India is a talent magnet. So from
Mm-hmm.
where we stand at the intersection of, say, finance, legal, policy, tax hiring, it's one of the most enabling reforms we've seen for India's position in the global talent strategy map. So quite
Mm-hmm.
excited. And interestingly, conversations have already started with some of our clients where they need with thinking of really transforming their functions to make it more decision making centric rather than just say we'll follow the word from the enterprise itself. So very excited.
Wonderful. So, Abhijit, clearly Rishabh believes that this development is a shot in the arm. It's probably the start of a whole new movement and a lot of excitement. What is your take?
I think it's a brilliant news that this change in the policy has reforms in the GST which have came.
Mm-hmm.
But I would want to understand from Rishabh perspective as well, because this, as soon as this policy came out,
Mm-hmm.
there is also a news between a short dispute between and GCCs in terms of whether GCCs are going to choose IT vendors as their outsourcing clients or not. Because obviously, if they choose IT vendors, there will be a less transparency in terms of the tax optimizations. So I just want to get a thought from Rishabh's end on this point.
Rishabh, the
No,
panel
and
is open. Please go ahead. Before Rishabh, I'm so sorry. I just thought it would be nice for all of us to welcome Gaurav, although he's a little late to the party. Hi, Gaurav. How are you?
Hey, hi, I'm doing good. How are you?
Wonderful for you to join us. Really
Thank you
looking
so much.
forward to your insights and inputs. Sorry, Rishabh, go ahead, and then, of course, I'll come to Gaurav to ask about his take on this particular reform.
perfect. And I think I'll probably take this moment to, in fact, the jargon, the concept of GCCs, particularly, right? A
Yeah, that
GCC
would be nice.
and what a lot of people think of a captive, which is not really the right word. It's still a global capability center, and there's an
Okay,
intention of why we are using the word capability, right?
okay.
And it's essentially an extension of the global enterprise. So it
Hmm.
cannot be seen as just a back end office. It's basically an extension of the global enterprise. So it's not just about delivery; it's about ownership. The strategy may be set by the parent company, right? But as long as the work is being done in India, which is deeply embedded into the global value chain, that is what
Mm-hmm.
is GCC. Now, where it gets a bit blurry is when people sort of confuse it with, say, an IT services firm or a vendor who sort of set up large India centers for one client. But
Mm-hmm.
there,
Can you please give
in
an
most of these
example?
cases,
It would really help, Rishabh, as we are moving along, because this is very, very important and pivotal for all of us to understand a clear-cut definition as far as an IT and a GCC is concerned. So it would be nice if you can probably just embellish them with examples.
So I'll be wary of taking names because some of them we also work with as clients,
Fair
right? As,
enough.
as in some of them we right, but that's why I'm giving analogies to explain the concept
Sure.
particularly,
Fair enough. Fair
right?
enough.
And the lens that typically someone needs to wear is that if say the commercial relationship is through a third party contract
Mm-hmm.
and the processes and the people are managed externally, then personally I would hesitate to call it a true GCC, right?
Okay.
If it's actually more internalized, if the contracts are more internal, if the commercial relationship is internal, then there's a true GCC. And at Counselect and Vahura, which are two organizations that I'm part of, for Counselect, I'm a director, and our mission at Counselect is basically to unleash business legal leverage. And
Mm-hmm.
Vahura, I'm a partner, wherein we are basically India's leading governance search firm. So whenever we look at GCCs, we look at the
Mm-hmm.
governance and operating model to define it. First question
Okay.
would typically be in our mind like, is there a functional ownership from India?
Mm-hmm.
Is there shared accountability? Right? If everything
Right.
is sort of put on to just a third party vendor, there is no
Mm.
real GCC. And are the
That, yeah,
India
okay.
leads part of the global decision making fabric?
Mm.
If all these questions are sort of answered in positive, yes, that's a GCC.
All right. Rishabh, also, please, I would like for you to then shed light on very clearly, like the way you have done it with the definition of a GCC, very please clearly also define the IT services aspect as well. Would be nice so that we are all clear
Sure.
before we deep dive
Correct.
into this.
Correct. So in typically an ITC services model, you would typically have a vendor set up a large India center for one client. So it's not really the same entity which is running it. It's basically through a third party contract.
Hmm.
In such models, you will also typically see people and processes are going to be managed externally, and
Hmm.
that's the true distinction between a GCC and an IT services firm running a project for one of the clients.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that because that brings clarity right at the start. Gaurav, how are you doing? I wanted you to join the conversation. Please tell us what is your reaction to this particular reform which has taken place.
No, I think maybe, Sudhir, probably I'll also try and give my bit to what Rishabh added,
Please,
right? Just since
please.
that I come from the services world and I've now been running an advisory firm that works with NASCOM and GCCs, right? So let me actually give you a simple analogy, right? So when you think of an IT services versus a GCC, when a McDonald's or a Microsoft or
Hmm.
a Salesforce, ServiceNow, NVIDIA are actually outsourcing a piece of transformation or a piece of a Workday ERP implementation, SAP ERP implementation, they actually create a model with an Accenture TCS Infosys called as an offshore development model, offshore development centers. So you'll have a Microsoft ODC in an Accenture, HCL, TCS, multiple technology services firms would then actually combination of offshore, on-site, nearshore, they would deliver the transformation as a managed deal to the customer, right? Which was the traditional model, which actually succeeded from the time I started my career,
Hmm.
or from the time I've seen this in the last 2.5 decades, right? Now, in the last couple of years, clients have started believing that they could, while they work with the managed services partner, technology transformation partner, a Microsoft, a Snowflakes, a McDonald's, a First Citizen Bank, an American Airlines, a Henneken, Carlsberg, who just came last week, as an
Yeah.
eBay, who also set up last week, believe that, hey, while we work with an Accenture, HCL, Cognizant, TCS, or a NES or anybody else, let's also actually drive transformation through our own extended centers. And what technically in India we call them now as capability centers, because these are guys who are delivering high-end solutions and they're an extension of the parent. So from an ODC model, we have come to a maturity where we are now having about 1,800 GCCs, which are like capability centers of the parent, exactly like what Rishabh said. If I'm doing work as McDonald's India or as ServiceNow, Snowflakes, Meltwaters for my headquarters, then that's technically defined as a global capability center.
Hmm.
Coming to Sudhir, your point, the current reform, I think it's a brilliant reform for the entire industry. While there are bunch of benefits that you'll see from our perspective, let me actually tell you, given the kind of work that we do with the CFOs and compliances teams with the GCCs, two of the biggest challenges that you ask a CFO in a GCC who works very
Hmm.
closely with us, right? Mid-size, small, large, was one on the transfer pricing laws clarity, saying, "Hey, I'm a headquarter
Hmm.
who's bringing R&D work, who's bringing technology support work, who's bringing BPO kind of work. What kind of transfer pricing charges and taxation do I pay?" And the
Hmm.
second biggest challenge, right, for them was the GST related refunds, right?
Sure.
Because I am buying services, I'm buying space. I have an IndiCube space, I have a Prestige space, I have an Embassy space, I have a Smart Work space, and I'm paying for it and I'm getting charged as a GST on it. How do I manage the refund of that? So this reform takes care of all their headaches, because it's not just a compliance and a taxation challenge, but it's
Hmm.
also the challenge in terms of how do I manage that refund? How do I pass the benefits back on to my headquarters? So I think it's a big transformative reform which eases the life of a compliance and the CFO team and the legal teams. And there's a lot of about 10 to 20% of their time used to go on in settling the GST dispute and managing
Hmm.
the refund. Huge amount of refunds, which will be lying with different states, and different states treat this differently because it's a state subject as well, right? Some of the states
Sure.
have a very matured outlook to it, some of them didn't have. This actually brings all of them on a level playing field. And not only do they buy space from India, Sudhir, when you look at a GCC in India, they
Hmm.
buy
Hmm.
consulting services from Rishabh's organization to our organizations to the big fours. They buy staffing, recruiting solutions. They buy managed services deals, R&D, and technology services deals from the likes of multiple other. I mean, I wouldn't take name. They today work with about 1,700. These 1,800 GCCs work with 17,000 service providers in the country today, and they were
Wonderful.
all charging them GSTs in different ways and forms. This actually
Hmm.
makes it much easier for them, and it also, by the way, adds back onto their bottom line, because what
Hmm.
it does
Hmm.
is it gives them a lot more flexibility now on the cash flows. The
Sure.
18% GSTs that they were sort of paying and then trying to refund. So with that cash flow, what exactly, like Rishabh said, what they can do is they can look at innovation driving from academia partnerships in India. They could look at adding that back to growing the capability centers of AI, R&D, center of excellences that they would set up. It's a huge benefit or a win-win for India, because India can now, with the same amount of money that these GCCs bring to India, will actually see a lot more innovation and transformation work happening, rather than the GCCs trying to struggle and manage this in the cash flows.
Wonderful. So essentially, Gaurav, Rishabh, and Abhijit, the way I understand it is, Abhijit, I hope you were very, very clear in terms of the definition. And I would like to obviously move on to the next question, because we've already kind of, once we are all clear on the GCC and the IT services definition clarity, I think what both the points that have been made by Gaurav and Rishabh are the fact that this reform tends to bring a huge sense of encouragement, a huge sense of energy, as probably the way the entire landscape or maybe the mindset in the boardrooms is going to be. Do you feel that that will suddenly give a great sense of impetus as far as the ecosystem is concerned? Gentlemen?
Sorry, was that?
I'd asked Abhijit, and of course, then I would like to follow up with Gaurav and Rishabh.
Okay, the coming to your point, I think I just wanted to complete on the definition part of what we are
Hmm.
calling the GCCs. Uh, I will agree with Rishabh what said, what Gaurav mentioned, but I will also want to say key right now, like previously, all the GCCs, Global Capability Center, used to be called as cost centers or captive centers.
Hmm.
We all know that the first GCs which came to India is one of like Texas Instruments and Citibanks. So I think by that time period, the term of being a captive centers has changed or transformed to a capability centers.
Hmm.
So the moment it started to getting realized, okay, now there are being innovations and R&D happening within these
Hmm.
centers. I think the capability centers is now the right term for these sort of organization working from India for their parent organization.
Okay. Gaurav and Rishabh, I would like to, of course, move on to ask you this outlook and numbers, which is basically India already hosts about 1700 to 1900 plus GCCs, which is what you have just spoken about, Gaurav. And the forecast is to reach 2100 to 2200 by 2030. This is NASCOM Zenov. So, with other estimates at 2400 to 2550 and $110 billion market size by 2030, Ernst& Young, DNB, and Marsh. The question is, given this range, where do you see the realistic landing zone for GCC count and revenue by 2030? So basically, what's your base versus bull case?
So see the numbers which I think are being thrown around, whether by the first study that you sort of mentioned, or in fact the other study that you mentioned subsequently, they definitely look aggressive, but they're not unrealistic, right? But what I, as a recruiter, as a talent solutions expert, is more interested in is what kind of GCCs are we really building, right?
Sure.
We could easily hit those numbers if we keep doing what we are doing, right? But the real value, in my view, lies in if there's a shift from considering these as support functions to core business capabilities.
Fair.
And that mindset is changing now, right?
Hmm.
That's where we are seeing hiring patterns, whether global CFOs, CHROs, GCs, they're no longer just sending transactional work to India. They're
Hmm.
actually trusting the India piece with things like IP creation, governance norms, even compliance design, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So in my opinion, as someone who's seeing it from a talent lens, and also someone who's in the boardroom with CFOs, CEOs, CHROs regularly, and GCs as well,
Sure.
I would say that 2200 could be the base case and move up to 2400. But if India gets leadership talent, AI readiness, the right frameworks, the right workflows, and the right management tool as well, from a risk management perspective, we could be home to every second global capability hub.
Gaurav, do you feel what Rishabh has said in terms of the fact that when we are looking at a sense of what probably Gaurav is, what Rishabh is definitely alluding to is the fact that there is a sense of autonomy that is being now handed over. There is a sense of the fact that, okay, there is an ownership to it, which wasn't the case earlier. So, do you feel that this particular reform is also going to help and embellish that entire thought process and that entire narrative as we move forward? And will that have an impact or a ramification on these numbers?
No, absolutely. I think first I'll try and probably answer your question on the numbers, given that we've also worked with NASCOM as a joint research partner on the
Hmm.
GCC
Hmm.
playbooks that we did for Telangana, Maharashtra, and Tamil Nadu report, right? So our estimate to your question on the base case, if you look at, we are already at about 1800 plus GCCs today. As of,
Yes.
I mean, we've seen about 22 plus GCCs set up this year itself. So far, when I look at Jan to August, more than Jan to August cycle, we also believe that historically we've hit a number of about 50, 60 GCCs. The best of the times we've hit about 75 GCCs in a year, established in a year. And we believe that going forward with the kind of reforms we have and with the kind of narrative that's been set up, especially the outcome that has been delivered by some of the most matured GCCs, right? To
Hmm.
Abhijit's point, if you look at JPMC is today one of the largest GCC with about $2+ billion of transfer pricing. I wouldn't share the exact number, but over $2 billion of transfer pricing they send to run the India Center, and JPMC is doing everything that's set up or that's been touched by the headquarters. Similarly, and they're about roughly about 50, 60,000 people. They're as large as one of the mid-sized technology services firms, right? So, given the kind of success that some of them, from Texas Instrument to Intuit to Gojek to JPMC across the sectors, right, Tesco, Target, that they have laid the foundation which has been laid,
Hmm.
we believe that our base case is anywhere between 75 to 90 GCCs a year. So hitting that number of 2,200 to 2,300 is easily possible. But
Hmm.
we are actually seeing increasingly reforms like this makes it easier for mid-size, small-size
Hmm.
enterprises who are operating in the US Like I said,
Correct.
right, two of the biggest challenges is transfer pricing and the margins that they need to bring. In
Sure.
fact, we run something called as Insight Circle, where we have a bunch of CFOs, CIOs, and the country heads who come in,
Mm-hmm.
and majority of the mid-sized GCCs talk about the fact that the headquarter itself is a 12-15% margin company, and if they have
Right.
to come to India and have to manage with a 15, 18, 20% sort of margin, that itself
Mm.
is challenging for some of the mid-sized GCCs and these GST challenges that we had. I think
Mm.
government is also taking the right reforms, making the setup process much easier. In fact, each of the state governments are also trying to come up with single window clearances. So I think it's a multiple combination of reforms at the central government level, at the state government, and in fact, there's a competition between each of the states. Right, everybody is trying to
Sure.
create Cs which are
True.
friendly.
True.
Given
True.
all of that, I think our base case is 75 GCCs a year. Our best case is about 90 to 100 GCCs a year. So I think we would be saying that about 2,200, 2,300 is realistically achievable. Over the next 5 years, you're going to look at about another 300, 400 GCCs. And in the best case, as more mid-market enterprises or
Mm.
mid-sized
Mm.
enterprises from US, Europe, and some of the new geographies like Japan, South Korea, which are also entering and trying to look at India as a hub, the best case is about 2,400 to 2,500.
Wonderful. Abhijit, it's this one for sure is for you. AIM research is a cornerstone also in a way in terms of the kind of reports that you put out and the deep dive that you do. I would like for you to maybe give us a little bit of insight from that perspective. What Gaurav has just spoken about, what Rishabh has just spoken about. We've talked purely numbers right now, and the impact of the reform on those numbers. What is your overall research, and what does your overall worldview say about this?
So, Sudeep, I will start with the your first question, where you mentioned that there are 1,700 to 1,800
Yeah.
GCC. So, the first thing which comes into my mind is while seeing the companies who are mentioning these GCCs in their databases as the list. So, how they are considering the companies as the GCCs? This is the
Hmm.
biggest question. Are because I have seen so many companies considering the IT service providers as the GCCs.
But I thought
So
we had cleared up that definition with both the gentlemen. I mean, Gaurav
yes,
and
yes.
Rishabh.
So right now, what we speak about, I think what Rishabh mentioned, what Gaurav mentioned, is the actual definition, and
Yes.
that distinguish between IT service providers and GCCs. So right now, if we are calling out the numbers of 1,700 to 1,800 and going up, so we have to be very sure about if these companies which are creating these sort of databases or these sort of lists are clear about what is the actual definition of calling out a global capability center. The second thing, which this policies or reforms are coming, I will agree both with Gaurav and Rishabh again. Yes, this is going to definitely increase the
Hmm.
amount of mid-sized GCCs
Yes, I think
to the
Gaurav made a very valid point, and so did Rishabh about that.
because even from our analysis, we are seeing a growth like every year. There is approx 85 to 90 companies GCCs are coming every year in India.
Hmm.
So
Hmm. Hmm.
if we are targeting somewhere around 2,100 to 2,400, so yeah, it's a logical number. But again, if I go again from the policy perspective, so
Hmm.
it's just a one line of clearing of ease of doing business. While you set up a GCC in countries like India, there are very different legal aspects which a GCC has to go through.
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
have spoke to many GCC leaders when we spoke about, as Gaurav mentioned, there is like a single window clearance method introduced by different state in their GCC
Yes.
policy.
Yes.
They have mentioned, see, they have mentioned in their policies, but still there are difficulties because India has a very long legal procedure.
Sure.
And yes, there are races going among the states. I think recently, in the starting of this year, MP came up with their own GCC policy. Last year, UP came up with
Hmm.
their GCC policy, targeting approx more than 1,000 GCCs to set up their centers in UP. And
Hmm.
we also know that in the last this year, even Kerala and Goa have also announced that they are going to also introduce their own GCC policies with areas of 3 years tax benefit and relaxation in SEZ zones. So it's a good change to have, but we have to
Hmm.
look towards more reforms if we are just calling in terms of ease of doing business for these global capability centers.
Actually, gentlemen, I'd first like to come to Rishabh because I think Rishabh, the Abhijit, the point that he made before I actually move on to the next bit, which is this is a small follow up because I thought that was a very relevant point in terms of there still being those lines which are blurred. Rishabh, uh, obviously, you gentlemen have tried your level best in terms of clarifying and giving the definition in terms of GCC and the IT services. But do you believe, in terms of when it comes down to the data factors, the data points, there might be still a certain sense of confusion? And that's one point one, which I think is an important point. The second one is what Abhijit mentioned regarding the fact that now that one has the blessings of the center, at least you know what, this reform is coming. Of course, there are other factors also which probably need to be addressed in terms of ease of doing business. Rishabh, you being a very experienced and an astute lawyer, how would you like to maybe address these two factors moving forward? And do you feel that that will help in a big way to expedite it even further?
Sure. So just to put it out very clearly as well, I've been a former lawyer, and for the last
Okay.
15 years or so, I've been in the executive search space.
Okay.
But given that we
But
always
Rishabh,
speak
please,
about
let's be
how
honest. Let's be honest. Once a lawyer, forever a brilliant lawyer mind.
correct. So we talk in the same circle, right? Like
Yeah.
keep on having discussions, and I think that's what sort of sets us apart as well. Wherein we try and understand what's happening on the business side. As
Yes.
far as first question is concerned, completely agree that there is that blurry line as well, right?
Hmm.
And that's where it's up to the government as well as the authorities to see uh, what the real definition is and how they can plug it for their own advantage
Hmm.
without really disrupting the positive sentiment of global organizations to
True.
create a GCC here, right?
True.
And that's why you probably see that some of the mindset has already changed. Instead of some third party vendors doing some of the older work, organizations are more than happy to sort of get their capability centers being run by the internal teams already, just
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
change that narrative altogether. So that will happen, right? As far as numbers are concerned, they will still be in the similar ballpark. Obviously, there'll be a plus minus 10% here and there because of the blurriness. But there will be that positive sentiment, and we will see more restructuring as well happening with these IT services hubs as well. And probably more collaborative arrangements between those organizations just so that they can also get the benefit of calling it a GCC rather than an IT services platform.
Fair. As far as do you see probably maybe more reforms which might be coming in apart from just this, because this just clears up one facet, but there are more which I believe will pave the way.
Correct. So there are all the conversations around GST tribunals coming in, right? That's been
Hmm.
something in the works for the longest time, and I think that will also give a lot of confidence because most global organizations are concerned about India from a governance standpoint. And if your
Yes.
governance norms become really strong, that gives the confidence to the board that hey, India is a place that we can really get a lot of good things done from, right?
Sure.
And it's no
Sure.
longer just a support function, but probably a lot of innovation, a lot of real decisions can be made from India as well, which can enable global transformation projects as well. So quite excited about what's in store, and hopefully a lot of good steps will come into the picture as well.
That looks positive, Gaurav, Rishabh. But before actually I go to Gaurav, I just have one last question to you. From again, I'm picking your lawyer brain, which is the fact that you talked about a tribunal, and the first thing that comes to mind is the fact that I'm not finding fault in anything. It's just probably the sheer numbers that the tribunals have been dealing with. So, for example, an NCLT or an NCLAT, etc. With this tribunal coming in, do you see maybe some changes in fast tracking a lot of things, because that would be giving the real confidence to the boardrooms?
Correct, absolutely. And I think that's the intention of the government as well and the stakeholders, that they
Hmm.
want this to happen, right? And I think that's why, in fact, if you look at some of the larger law firms in the country as well, they are
Hmm.
focusing on building their practices around this as well.
Hmm.
For a lot of those organizations, GST advisory has been a great, great practice in the past. But what a
Hmm.
lot of law firms are also anticipating now is the GST litigation piece picking up. And with those
Sure.
tribunals coming into the picture, the momentum is going to change. And I think that's the driving factor behind a lot of those global organizations to see India as as a center of governance standards being met. So definitely a positive step, and still lots to be done, right?
Sure.
Just the starting
Absolutely.
point, but
Yeah. Yeah.
the intention is right. The momentum is going to pick up.
All right. So that means, of course, the confidence is bolstered. Gaurav, the policy and the economics of it all. If I were to talk to you about that, that basically with export treatment clarity now that we have received, intermediary rule going away, improving refunds and cash flow. You already kind of alluded to that. But India's cost to serve improves on day one. Boardroom risk perception has been reduced. So the question is, how much does policy clarity, which is the GST fix, the safe harbor alignment, the tribunal go live, which of course Rishabh just spoke about, but what does it make in terms of tipping the global location decisions towards India over a Poland, a Philippines, a Mexico? Which policy, according to you, which will lever and move that needle, which is most for new mandates?
No, I think if you, I mean, if we to credit to India, right? If you look at today, we are the largest capability hub in comparison to any of the names that you took, right? We do a lot of research on India plus one as an opportunity for a
Hmm.
global client who work with at another site, right? Where they come to us and ask a question saying, hey, India versus Poland versus Mexico versus others. So to our credit, there are three or four big benefits, which I will also talk about the reforms, but the scale of talent, right, is something which is unmatched when you compare that. Some of the countries that you mentioned are actually comparable to a state of Karnataka itself or to a state
Yes,
of
that's true
UP
actually.
itself, right? The
Yeah.
second biggest difference is we have an extremely matured 40 plus 50 plus year old technology services industry, which some
Sure.
of these countries don't even currently boast, right? I mean, as compared to what we have as a size of. So majority of the technology services industry has created veterans like Rishabh and multiple other people who have actually understood the entire offshoring models, and they've actually now been uh, currently leaders across GCCs who are actually delivering this. To your point of reforms, I think given because of these reforms is where we have more than 250 plus of the Fortune 500. Out of
Hmm.
Fortune 500, we have over 200 of them here in GCCs, right? As a GCC, close to 40-50% market
Hmm.
share of that. Of
Hmm.
all the GCC hubs, India is over 30 to 40% market share. All of this has happened because of ease of setup, ease of operations,
Sure.
ease of running, governance, compliances. Uh, and the other piece that you asked about now, what else will actually transform us to
Yes.
actually getting to a 60-70%? I think couple of other challenges that today, like I think briefly I talked about. While this GST reform is a good step, this is actually for somebody who's already in the country to
Yes.
actually make a pitch and make a stronger pitch. I think there are three or four components that we need to look at. When I think Abhijit talked about it briefly, when you think of a setup process, right? The setup process, or even to say yes or no to India, it's a 12-month life cycle sale for
Hmm.
anybody like us or some of the other GCC enablers in the country, right? It
Hmm.
takes a CFO, CIO, CFO, and the compliance leaders to say yes, which is over a 12-month period. And once
Hmm.
they say yes, it's actually another 60 to 90 days, while the entire physical registration is a much easier process. So there are three things that we need to do, right? One is at an India level, if we can have a
Hmm.
single window clearance and one single license that oversees about 12 to 15 central government licenses that you need to procure, right? Single window
Oh, that'll
clearance.
be a big boost. Big
Sorry?
boost. That'll be a big boost, Gaurav. Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. Because if you look at a complexity, we have a co-founder who's run a GCC for 20, 30 years, right? And we do a lot
Right.
of roundtables, like I said. I think their biggest challenge is one single window, if that can happen. Second, there is the transfer pricing, law that we need to come out with, top down, not a bottom up, because today the definition of transfer pricing, and whether you are doing high end R&D work, then what's
Hmm.
the set of
Hmm.
margin that you need to operate with? If you're doing mid end work with IT engineering plus technology services work for your headquarter, you're implementing, let's say you're a Tesco target and you're implementing SAP and Workday, and your GCC is a part of that. Your India plus Poland GCC is a part of that transformation. If you don't define it very clearly that, hey, this is a 20%, this is a 15%, and if you're doing
Hmm.
back office work, right? And I'll
Hmm.
also come to your question of blurring of the lines, then you're paying a 10% transfer pricing. One of the biggest challenge, I'll tell you, Sudhir, that majority of the mid-size enterprises, US is largely, even if you look at it from an outside, be it banking, be it
Hmm.
financial services, be it healthcare, fintech, manufacturing, 50% of US economy is still SMBs and mid-size and small-size
Yeah.
market size businesses, right?
Yeah.
To make India attractive for them, we need to make transfer pricing more clearer, crisper, and set the guidelines of what is an R&D high-end AI transformation services, what is
Hmm.
mid and what is low end, and also
Hmm.
make sure that there are flexibilities allowed. Like I said, there are a lot of headquarters, a lot of companies in US, Europe, and multiple
Hmm.
other countries who still operate at much lower profit percentages, right? Their
Sure.
EBITDA and their gross profits are lower,
Yeah.
so they cannot
Yeah.
afford. The CFO in India, GCC cannot say that, hey, you can have a 10% margin in the headquarters, but I
Hmm.
want you to actually have a 20% margin in India, because that's what the transfer
Hmm.
pricing law talks about. You will
Yeah.
actually make it not so attractive for them as compared to some of the other places that you talked about. I
True.
think that's one more transformatory reform. If you could do some bit of, one is a single window clearance. Second is the definition of what the transfer pricing margin, and don't leave it to a state government or an officer at the state level, because that creates more complexities.
So
And
you
I'm
believe this should be at the center?
sorry.
This you said don't leave it at the state government or the officer. Do you believe that this reform obviously needs to come from the center? I mean, the narrative needs to be set by them.
Yeah, if it's top down, what it does is it
Sure.
makes state and the officers to implement it much easier, as compared to an officer, an officer, or a transfer pricing TP officer, as they're called, right? A TP
Sure.
officer walking into a McDonald's office and trying to figure out, hey, how many of you do high-end R&D versus how many of you do tech
Hmm.
services versus
Sure.
how many of you actually work with academia. It's an extremely difficult exercise. I think if it's
Right.
set top down, becomes easier. And also the third reform, which could also be around flexibilities. Can you actually give
Hmm.
flexibility looking at the headquarters financials? Can you look
Hmm.
at their financials and see, hey, there is an XYZ, again, I wouldn't take names, but a lot of European GCCs who are trying to come to India, their biggest struggle is, hey, I cannot have a 20% margin for a GCC that I set up. I would love to have it, but I'm happy to then outsource this to somebody like a services provider and manage with it. So that's going to be a big push if you can do that. The 75, 90 GCCs in a year, which I'm
Right.
talking about, and some of them are choosing a Philippines or a Poland. Obviously, those countries have slowed down significantly because of
Hmm.
a lot of attraction factors in India. But I think that could take these numbers to anywhere between, about even over 100. Because today, Sudhir, we have 20,000 multinationals who get their technology, R&D, and AI work delivered out of India in the
Wow.
form of technology services firms delivering that work.
Wow.
2,000 is just 10% of that overall market share. So we're just still scratching the surface.
Before Gaurav, we need to go into a short break. But before we do, you had talked about the fact that you will just comment very briefly on the blurry lines bit, and I genuinely want to know what's your thought on that, because from when
Sure.
Abhijit did talk about the data aspect, it's an important factor. The floor is yours, Gaurav.
So on blurring of the lines, so that if you look at my 2 decades of experience, like I said, I've spent time with consulting firms on the other side of the table to then advise being part of technology services firms like Accenture, HCL, and currently my conversation, because our largest customer set in at Unearth Insight is still technology services firms, right?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, there is blurring of lines. If I give you a global to local perspective,
Mm-hmm.
if I was a technology services firm trying to work with a McDonald's, an Albertsons, or an eBay in the global destination, and then I also have the GCC here. If I'm actually doing a global to local MSA, right? I have a partnership with them globally, and I'm also trying to work with them in India.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, there is a cannibalization, and I wouldn't mince my words there. When I talk about cannibalization, if I was to work with AIM, or let's say, I'm just hypothetically taking an example, or an XYZ technology services firm in the US, at a price point that I would close the deal in the US, versus then me working with them in India, there's
Mm-hmm.
definitely a cannibalization, and this blurring of lines is increasingly becoming more painful for the tech services ecosystem, and that's where they need to quickly think of a model wherein they can be a co-partner in the setup, which some of them are already doing, which is helping them also understand how they can set up their GCCs in India, help them set up. Accenture was a key leader
Sure.
along with Accenture in helping McDonald's set up their GCC in India, right? And
Mm-hmm.
also think of a way in which they could transform from being the old traditional technology services model of an FT based model to more services as a software versus a
Sure.
licensing model, where together the GCC and the technology services firms are actually delivering what you call as a true transformation. Why should
Mm.
it take an organization to implement an SAP Oracle 3 years, 2 years? I think today AI native firms are building solutions, and given the transformation and given the change that AI has brought in and Gen AI has brought in, I think there is an urgent need, and that's a question that boards are asking of saying, hey, what is the value that you're delivering as a
Yes.
technology services firm for me? While I also have a GCC in India, which is doing this for me, which is the traditional ODC model set up in a
Sure.
GCC model, right? And that's where this blurring of line needs a very important transformation that needs to come from India's strength, which is India's technology services industry
Mm.
has historically been its strength. I think that needs to start coexisting, but not just coexisting, but taking a stance saying, how do I change your enterprise tech stack? How do I make your enterprise technology stack more AI first? And let me play that journey. And as I play in that journey, I will actually work with your GCCs as well, because both of them will be, interesting buyers for me. One globally and one locally in India.
Fair enough. You had mentioned that you were excited about collaborating forces with AIM research. We'll be more than happy to do so. Just thought that before we get on with the rest of the conversation, I should talk about that.
Sure. No, I think just to also add my 2 more cents in terms of the blurring of the lines, right? If
Fair.
that's what, yeah.
Fair.
So I think as some of our technology services, both global and local, who operate from India, I think as they mature, and majority of them are actually like what you talked about, right? Are also trying to uh, identify areas in which they can actually build AI as a service line, right?
Sure.
And while they do that, I think what's very important for them is, as most of their clients are going to be closer to where they deliver work from, where historically they haven't been used to this model, right? The
Mm-hmm.
clients will also start asking them challenging questions around what's the differentiation between the enterprise GCC versus the service provider partner who's also existing in the same geography. So I think my input there is going to be, I think we need to see how some of the large, mid-size, and smaller technology services firm can quickly pivot to building AI stacks. Right? When I say AI stacks,
Sure.
I think now is an era where some of them will have to go away from the traditional large scale and FT based building models to
Mm.
more functional and domain specific technologies that they can build in partnership with the hyperscalers, in partnership with the enterprise product firms, and how can they start embedding that in both global HQs and in the GCCs, right? So if I was just to take a hypothetical example, how can you now start building as a services firm,
Mm.
not just implement an SAP Oracle Guidewire or any of the hyperscaler technologies, but how can you build a financial application that can transform the entire finance stack, right? From AP, accounts payables, to record to report to FP&A, rather than just
Mm-hmm.
deploying people to integrate and solve for that. Similarly, can I build a clinical solution that actually takes care of Pfizer, Novartis, drug discovery, drug development, R&D compositions, to then building a stack that can actually help them launch the drug much faster, right? Because if you saw in COVID,
True.
we had to actually go with, I mean, we had actually seen a historical precedence where we saw in year and a half, or in less than a year, the pharma company started building a drug, right? A new drug discovery is a 15-year process even today, right?
Yeah.
For some
Yeah.
of the other challenges. How can you make a bank like a JPMC or a First Citizen Bank or a LSE, for example, London Stock Exchange, which is now running a GCC in Bangalore?
Mm,
How
mm.
can you make their technology more customer friendly, more customer experience friendly? Very similar to Sudhi, what you and I would see with a HDFC Bank, with a
Sure.
Ujjivan. When you look at these banks, they're technology first businesses now. You would
Yes.
expect a bank, a retailer, or a food and beverages place where you and I visit to be more technology friendly. In a chayos, you and I can go and customize 100 varieties of chais that you and I want based on the weather, right? They can tell you, hey,
Sure.
December, this is what you consumed if it was very chilly in Delhi. And how are they able to do this? Because the CTM and the CRM
Mm,
technology is talking to each other and is identifying what a Sudhi likes, what a Rishabh likes, what a Gaurav likes. And that's the kind of experience that some of these global companies are in the technology world trying to give to their customers. And that's where the IT services or technology services firm, as we call them, or the BPM and the analytics, where the lines are again blurring within them, have
yeah.
to deliver a high-end experiential technology which is more domain rich, rather than just implement a certain transformation and leave for the customer.
Fair enough. I think that that clarifies this. And I think in a big way, Gaurav, what you had mentioned, I wish if it comes into action, I think that data point that Abhijit had mentioned will be far clearer and moving forward. Abhijit, this I would like to start with you on this particular question is from purely the point of view of the research aspect which you bring to the table, the rich research that you bring. So, according to me, the question is, where do you feel new GCCs will start leaning? Capabilities, not just cost. The model is actually shifting from cost arbitrage to actually capability arbitrage, like Gaurav had just mentioned. So AI, ER&D, cloud, compliance. The point is, which capability clusters? Will it be AI slash machine learning, COEs, and D, RegTech, data platforms are most likely to see net new GCC setups in the next 12 to 24 months. And of course, for the why, I would like for you to, of course, kick this off. And then, I'd like to talk to Rishabh and Gaurav and get their points of view.
Sudhi, if you could just clear the first few lines that you mentioned in your question, wasn't able to
What I
hear you
was
clearly.
All right, Abhijit. So basically, I'll tell you about the my thought where I'm going with this is that where will the GCCs lean? Which capability cluster? AI, machine learning, COEs, and D, RegTech. Will it be data platforms? Which are the most likely to see the net new GCC setups in the next 12 to 24 months? And obviously, why?
Yes. So, see, in last few years, not even few years, I would say that this has started happening from last year onwards only. That most of the GCCs have started to come up with their COEs or Center of Excellence. So these most of their units of their centers are mostly focused towards data and analytics. They have started shifting towards data and analytics. Interestingly, if we go across the sectors, so the major sectors that have started focusing towards these particular is BFSI and retail. Retail
Sure.
is still like running behind BFSI, but I think BFSI it's like mostly leading this competition in terms of if we say what sort of GCCs are going to establish in terms of or what sort of GCCs are going to establish in next 12 or 24 months. So this is the major scenario which is going to happen that most of it's all is going to happen between AI and data analytics. So I think most of the companies which are trying to come up with end up in terms of setting up some sort of COEs or data centers or AI labs within India for sure.
Okay. So, Gaurav and Rishabh, since you are constantly interacting with the decision makers, you're consulting with the companies, you're probably obviously guiding them in a big way. I would like for you to tell us or shed light on both these factors, which is, of course, data centers, as Abhijit had mentioned. Also, I would really like for both of your inputs on the sectors, because that would be interesting. If you could just maybe combine the two, it will give us a very clear landscape. What would be the path that would be taken? Gaurav and Rishabh. Rishabh, I haven't spoken to you in a while, so I would like for you to start.
Great. So just to add on to what Abhijit was also saying, right? If we were to probably break it down into four big areas that we see scaling up right now, uh, definitely AI governance, right? We're seeing a lot of work happening within that space. The other space, because of the conversation that we've been having with a lot of players in the market, is finance transformation, right? Especially global tax operations being worked from India. And in line with that as well, a lot of compliance analytics, because data is the new oil, right? As people keep on
Sure.
saying. So,
Hmm.
so that's where we see a lot of work being done around compliance analytics and ESG plus legal. I think that's where we are seeing a lot of synergy coming in within India, because the question that companies are no longer asking is like, hey, can India deliver? They're actually asking, what can India lead on from those particular centers? And
Very encouraging. Yeah.
we've been placing leaders in India who are running risk, compliance, tax planning, contract governance, and technically for the globe, right? Because that's the purpose of a global capability center, so that
Hmm.
they can run those functions for the globe. And,
Hmm.
and that's where we see a capability story, and it's no longer a cost story, which was the case during your captives and IT solution
Sure.
providers. So,
Sure.
right. And to answer your second question also very briefly, because I'm also cognizant of the time, um,
Hmm.
beyond BFSI and SaaS, which have been your conventional sort of sectors which keep on seeing a sharp uptick, there's interest coming in from healthcare and life sciences,
Hmm.
primarily from a data privacy, pharmacovigilance perspective. A lot of clinical ops is also being worked upon. Retail and e-commerce, right? That's where we are seeing a lot of finance transformation happening.
Hmm.
AI powered customer insights are becoming important, and hence your AI governance and frameworks have to be extremely strong. And the third sector that we are seeing a lot of traction with
Hmm.
from the
Hmm.
conversations that we are having with people has been in the space of industrials and energy. And that's where regulatory compliance, your ESG analytics with a
Yep.
lot of data, that's going to become super important. And those are based on the conversations, the kind of mandates that we've been helping. And just to give everyone a sense, right, we're actually working, not actually working, we've actually closed the role with a pharma company where they were hiring a risk and data compliance lead. And five
Sure.
years ago, no one would have even thought that this role would have sort of emerged in India, where you're going to
Sure.
combine risk and data compliance together, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's the beauty of how we are going to see a lot of interesting roles emerge within those GCCs as well.
Which is very, very exciting. Gaurav, I would love for you to maybe take it up from where Rishabh just left off. And please actually uh, shed light on this with an example, because, that would just give us something which is very fleshed out. We'll be able to understand, like Rishabh just very, very simply hinted at a farmer perspective or whatever. What is your thoughts on it? And if you could probably just bolster it with an example.
Yeah. So, no, so very quickly, when you talk about the sectors, if you look at the current composition, right,
Hmm.
currently the 1800 GCCs, we have two sectors that clearly stand out as the largest winners. One is what we categorize, again, everybody has a different categorization. We call them as enterprise technology and cloud, right?
Yeah.
So, if you look at from the larger ones of Amazon, Google to AWS to Snowflake, CloudStrike, to the younger companies like Blaze, Clavio, and a couple of others which are in the enterprise technology space, where they are impacting technology of the clients from across the spectrum, right? Finance to HR to cybersecurity. So I think these two sectors are by far the largest contributors. We believe that going forward globally, given that both in US, Europe, which are the largest geographies as well, and in some of the other geographies, in the 75 to 100 new GCC setups. We clearly feel that I think enterprise tech is going to be the largest contributor going forward. We don't talk about it because a
No.
lot of them are not very large, flashy, or known companies. Many of them are, for example, a lot of people don't know that we have the largest supply chain technology GCCs in India, from O9 to
Hmm.
Kinaxis to Anaplan to multiple others, right, which are in the enterprise tech space. Our strong belief is that given the scale at which technology and AI and native AI companies are transforming the tech stacks globally, I think it's no longer going to be BFSI, but I think for the next 2 to 3 years, our data suggests, based on the pipeline of multiple enablers and technology services firms who are trying to currently engage with the leaders, and where we are also, by the way, we have a new entity that's set up called Unearth IQ, which is
Hmm.
going to be in the US, Germany, and France, and a few of the other geographies. We believe that it's going to be enterprise tech which is going to drive the next wave for the next 1 or 2 years. They are clearly going to be 50% of the current pipeline, is close to about 50% of all the enabler pipelines, all of us and some of our competitors as well. The next set of sectors which we interestingly see a lot of interest from is going to be hospitality, retail, and entertainment. When I say hospitality, you've seen Henneken and
Hmm.
Carlsberg,
Hmm.
the most loved companies that we've seen and been consumer of, right?
Because of their bottled water.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we've seen them, trying to look at India. We've seen Hilton in the past, we've seen Expedia in the past, who have started looking at it. I think increasingly, given the geopolitical challenges, given
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
tariff challenges, given the inflationary pressure challenges in their own countries, in their own geographies, I think
Hmm.
increasingly they will look at how can they actually further look at expansion of technology and reduce
Hmm.
cost. So I think cost arbitrage is going nowhere. India will still remain a cost arbitrage primary destination, and then innovation clubbed with it makes it
Hmm.
as a cherry on the top, right? So I think it's going to be, like we said, enterprise tech. It's going to be hospitality, entertainment, retail,
Pharma.
Farm, pharma, I'll also tell you, pharma may not remain as the largest cluster. I'm talking about the market share. Yes,
Huh.
you will see them. They may not bring in, let me actually give you a context of jobs. If you look
Hmm.
at
Hmm.
the largest number of jobs that will be created when we go from 2 million to a 3 million employment, I think the largest cluster, even though they don't, unlike a JPMC, they may not be a 50,000 people center, but I think the largest job creators are going to be the mid market enterprise GCCs. Larger, I wouldn't say they'll be the largest. Then you will have fintechs, because now banks and financial services who are leveraging a lot of the Robinhood kind of solutions, Gcash kind of solutions, many of them will start leveraging and looking at GCC in India to remain competitive with the partners as well. I think
Hmm.
pharma and healthcare, I think majority of them have already in the current wave. Recently, we have seen some of the others as well. But if you look at globally, I think pharma is more. If you see 80% of the pharma business globally is controlled by the top 50, and majority of them are already as GCCs in India. So next wave of pharma is also going to be like what Rishabh said, more of CROs and enablers for pharma, right?
Hmm.
And we feel that at least for the next 1 or 2 years, I think they may not be sort of leading the charts, both in terms of the size of the impact on the market share, market size, and the employment. But I
Hmm.
think we see a couple of other interesting sectors. We are seeing H&M is here, fashion and retail. So
Yeah.
I think they're going to be very interesting sectors and a good interesting mix of GCCs to have in India, because I think like what we had in the technology services maturity, we had technology services, product engineering, then we had AI analytics that came in. We
Hmm.
also need sectorial. And to your question on capabilities, we have a slightly different point of view, Sudhi, there. If you look at the last 50 GCCs that have set up in India, large, mid-size, small, they have looked at multi-capability centers in India,
Hmm.
because for a Henneken, for a Carlsberg, for a McDonald's, or for an eBay, which was the recent announcement, right? They would like to have their core product engineering, new product designs to center of excellences for creating futuristic solution in AI and Gen AI. At the same time, they also bring in what you call as the support functions to be delivered out of India. So it's going to be a larger multi-capability and encompassing sort of centers, where COEs and experience centers would be a critical. So they will actually have a larger impact. The size
Okay.
of those COEs may not be as large. And I think we are seeing, product development, product architecture. When I talk about the enterprise tech, if I talk about BFSI, we are seeing cybersecurity, compliances, We are seeing controllership sort of roles getting delivered out of India. If I talk about retail, right, we are no longer just doing IT enterprise implementation, but we are building customer experience. So in retail, we actually have an analogy called systems of records to systems of insights and systems of intelligence, from supply chain merchandising, to warehousing, to end-to-end delivery of the solution to the customer. A lot of retailers globally are trying to pivot to more technology businesses, right? Today,
Okay.
10% of traditional fashion technology is 10% of the revenue comes from the e-commerce sites. So it's going to be supply chain merchandising across the entire retail value chain. They are bringing all of that to India so that they can have a stronger interlinkage with the headquarters. So I think we're going to see a combination of high-end work plus combination of here and now value chain work, which is being delivered out of India. Case in point is your McDonald's to your
Yep.
eBays of the world, to Meltwaters and NetSmart, and a couple of other retail examples which I gave. I think it's going to be core part of the value chain and the support function. Both will coexist in India. The larger impact, to Abhijit's point, larger impact on what the headquarter does is going to come in from the center of excellence, because COE has to now build a futuristic AI first tech stack, which is challenge, but at the same time a great opportunity for India.
Wonderful. Gentlemen, due to the paucity of time, I just wanted to ask you this before we close for the day. I believe this is a topic which has been very, very enthralling. This is something which requires for us to have another panel discussion. This has been just probably part one of it. I would like to obviously encourage all of you and obviously ask all of you to please join us again, because we have so many things which we have left out and we are still to discuss. You gentlemen have made wonderful points about, let's say, the talent pool. Gaurav talked about it, where we are leading probably today. We need to understand how the tier 2 is going to impact this reform, how this reform will impact the tier 2 aspect. We need to
Yes.
understand on a mega scale in terms of, let's say, visas, in terms of tariffs, in terms of various things. How will it affect, if at all it will? I have also a very important aspect for to open up to all of you gentlemen, that I would like to understand from you, that how would we make us extremely exciting and a country where we can invite a lot of the new companies coming in who have already not set up their GCCs. But with all of these reforms and with the amount of knowledge that you have brought to the table today, I think that would be wonderful to give maybe a pathway to a lot of the companies which want to set up the GCCs here. So I would like very humbly to request you, three gentlemen, to join us again for another session, which is the part two, as far as this discussion is concerned. So, do I have a consensus on this?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Sounds
would
good.
love to come and share inputs
Yeah,
with
because
and
Rishabh, it seems that you also have a slight paucity of time. You also, Gaurav, I believe, and Abhijit. But yes, I mean, all of the factors that I touched upon, I would genuinely like to take up this discussion again, because it would be very illuminating for a lot of people.
absolutely.
Absolutely
Absolutely.
happy to be part of it.
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah,
so
yeah.
so
Happy to
grateful
share
for
our
that,
insights.
so
Yeah,
grateful for that, gentlemen, Abhijit, Gaurav, and Rishabh. Truly, it's been an honor, it's been a pleasure having a conversation with all of you. And the fact that we are going to have another session on this again is something which we are all looking forward to and very excited about. So I will be seeing you again, and once again I thank you all.
Perfect. Thanks a
thank you
ton.
so much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Deep.
Thanks,
Thank you
Sudhir.
so much.
Thank you so much. All right. So, well, the takeaways have been brilliant. The fact that this entire conversation has been very, very beneficial in terms of clearing up a lot of doubts. Well, so this isn't just an amendment. We are actually not intermediaries. We are exporters of knowledge, innovation, and scale. With export benefits restored, refunds unlocked, and policy clarity delivered, India has just made itself even more attractive for global companies deciding where to build their future. Simply put, intermediary era is over. Export era back on. and with a bang. And of course, we are going to be back again on Front Page. It's a wrap tonight. But when we are back, I promise you, we will be bringing back this discussion again with our panel. I don't know exactly when, I can't promise you that. But this is for sure. They've said it on record. They can't go anywhere. They will be joining us. I promise you that. Well, this is a wrap on Front Page on AIM Network. And needless to say, it is India's definitive media organization on everything AI and technology. We are powered by Cypher 2025, which is India's biggest AI summit and expo, which starts off on the 17th of September right through till the 19th of September. And as always, I say this, and I say this with a lot of pride. Think AI, think GCC, think AIM.